Hi all, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over some of the week's most important news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. We have one rule: we appreciate vigorous debate, but let's all be considerate and respectful to each other. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. Even if it sounds like investment advice, it isn't. We encourage those who enjoy this room to please connect with us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li, and I am the Managing Director at Sino Auto Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, and good evening from my side. My name is Lei Xing, and I am the former chief editor of China Auto Review based in Beijing, which published newsletters and the only tabloid magazine in English focused exclusively on the Chinese auto market. I've spent pretty much the last 20 years on the ground in China covering the industry, and now in the U.S. as an independent analyst consultant, still trying to keep tabs on the rapidly evolving market. And again, a housekeeping issue before we start. This is our second time doing our discussion on Twitter Spaces. So any glitches that we run into, I hope we don't. I apologize in advance. So this week for episode number 28, it's basically NIO, Tesla, and Baidu with one topic, AVs, but for different reasons. So let's start out with Baidu. So Baidu World 2021 was held on the 18th. So I guess yesterday, my time. And you were there. So tell us about your thoughts.
So it was my first Baidu AI World Conference. Wasn't sure what to expect. And in the COVID world, what was originally supposed to be a live event at their headquarters in Haidian ended up being a live stream to a movie theater in the area. So I was a little disappointed because I was excited to go check out the Baidu campus. But, again, Baidu, the overall theme was more about AI, and they had co-hosted this event with CCTV, which is the Chinese government channel. And so it was a bit like, and this was a little bit weird for me because it was a bit more like an infomercial / information session. And I believe that they were trying to really reach out to the general public in China because co-hosting it with CCTV, the demographics are much different than your traditional followers of technology or high tech in China or globally. And so part of it was kind of educating the audience on AI and Baidu's capabilities. They didn't really talk about search at all. They really talked about what the products and services they were leaning into towards the future. And the one thread or the one common thread among those was artificial intelligence and how, regardless of what vertical or service or product that they, or what Baidu branded product or service that they had, was their level of expertise and integration and data analysis capabilities in making your life better. One example was a reporter going to a hutong visiting a family, and they had used the example of a health app where it was helping one of the members of that family measure their weight and reminding them that, last week you had gained, you weighed this much, and this week you weighed this much. And then another example was going to another town in China and speaking with some of the water management and filtration system at the city level to how they managed to keep it clean and keep the supply available to people. They also talked about some of the consumer products that they were launching, a TV, kind of Amazon Echo kind of helper, and and some of it is very China features with a karaoke function and 2 microphones. So that was kind of funny. And to be quite frank, a little bit strange. They bookended it by announcing at the very beginning, and this was kind of the longest portion, a level 5 robotaxi that they were piloting in an area called Orania in Beijing with a celebrity. And so level 5, if we are looking at the common definition, is where there's no steering wheel, there is no brake pedal or acceleration pedal. So two people enter they called it via their app, which was called Apollo Go, but now it's called Luobo Kuai Pao. And we can talk about that in a second. So it was a 2-person vehicle with a large screen, and a couple things really stood out. The design of the vehicle or the taxi. It's not a conventional car, number one. There's no front windshield. So I think passengers will need to get used to that. People will need to get used to a vehicle that you can't see out the front. There could be some, I think, balance issues, and there could be motion sickness if you're not used to something like that. And then they were light on the technical specifications. So, and since we were live streaming, I couldn't really go kick the tires and check out the vehicle myself. I'm hoping to get an opportunity to do that down the line a bit, maybe speaking with some of their comms people or their technical folks to see if I can get an up close and personal view of it. But I don't know how far along they are from a commercialization standpoint and when that's ready, or if that was just a one-off prototype. And then on the tail end, they had announced an AI chip, version 2 of their Kunlun AI chip. And we also know that following this room, that the Chinese government is really looking to create independence on the chips and ASICs and the R&D and development of that sector, that vertical. It's very important for China to become independent. And so I think they really leaned into those 2 areas. And so it was good. Again, the consumer products, they were a little bit less impressive because there's a lot of products already out in the market. Xiaomi has products like that, Amazon, Facebook. And so nothing super innovative on that standpoint. The exciting stuff was, again, the robotaxi and the new chip. So, you were following it a bit and reading some of the Chinese internet. What were you getting out of that, and what were your takes?
Yeah, I watched the live stream. This was definitely not a automotive focused or even mobility focused event. It was an AI event where
yes,
how AI will play in a role in mobility, right? So basically they call it the robocar concept, right? Baidu is not a car company, so you can talk all about designs. You're gonna have to me, I thought it was a bit awkward looking concept, but considering Baidu is not a car company, design wise, we can cut it some slack. But
sure,
the way it was presented, I think the best analogy would be if you sat in a business class in a bullet train. I thought that was an analogy that I could think of in terms of the interior, right? Mm-hmm. And also the new mobility brand, the Luobo Kuai Pao, where the Luobo, the Chinese meaning radish or turnip, is used based on the robot, which if you say Luobo, it sounds like robot. So that was the reason behind the name, which I thought was also a little bit awkward. But it's there's a lot of these interesting, quirky things, conventions in China, which some people may like, but some other people may find it not as interesting. But I think basically 3 products, right? The concept Robocar, the Luobo Kuai Pao mobility brand, and then the AI chip. But, by the way, the Luobo Kuai Pao will be integrating the Apollo Go existing service, kind of like an upgrade, and then it will encompass all of the future robo-taxis, robo-buses,
Right.
minibuses, and other AV services, including the Apollo Moon, which we talked about in several episodes back. The one that Baidu is working with ArcFox using
Yes.
the Alpha T and selling at 480,000 RMB, the cheapest robotaxi, claiming to be at least. But here's my 3 takeaways that people might not have remembered or paid attention. I thought these 3 things were interesting. One, they talk about the development of the so-called 5G cloud designated driver. So these are drivers who are kind of working behind the scenes to take over the robotaxis in case something happens. So you have someone actually controlling or can take control of these vehicles in the background. And what they said was last year, you could have one person controlling one robotaxi. And this year they said they can have one person controlling multiple robotaxis.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting. That was number 1. Number 2, they shared a little bit more on Jidu, right? So what they said was they will try to put the latest autonomous driving technology onto this model, which will hit the market in about 2 to 3 years. So the most advanced technologies that Baidu can put on a private production car. So my guess is maybe it will become something similar to the Tesla FSD.
Right.
Okay. That basically you still have to be behind the wheel, but the car can do, ELF level 4 driving. So that's my guess. And that's number 2. And number 3 is the V2X, which is also an important part of the equation for AVs, is that they have this street in I think Baoding where they have a road traffic hardware that can help optimize vehicles. So if you're going through a set of traffic lights, it could be all green. It's like when you go down, if you've ever driven in New York City, those one-way streets, sometimes you can get like green lights all the way.
Yeah,
if you
it's
time it
timed.
right. So so I think this is part of a important kind of the equation in all of this AV ecosystem.
And that's what some of those transportation, the lighting and the timing. DD was actually working or is working with some cities on some of that because they help cities analyze traffic patterns. So it looks like Baidu's kind of getting into that as well. So
Right. So I remember a few years ago they were talking about working with like cities like Changsha to help with this kind of mobility flow, what they can tweak in terms of road infrastructure. So this is another part of involving AI and whatever Baidu is doing. So maybe the robo car concept wasn't it wasn't a kind of a home run out of the park, but it's just showing what Baidu's sense of the future, one form of future mobility, what it might look like. But I don't think the actual, if it ever goes into production, it will be like what was shown.
Yeah, I think this was, if we're looking at this from a traditional automaker standpoint, and every year there's the Detroit Auto Show, the Shanghai Auto Show, the Beijing Auto Show. I think this would be one of their concept vehicles, right? And they would take some of these concepts from that vehicle and try to commercialize them in the Jidu, in the ArcFox. And it should be noted that the Jidu is going to be pretty affordable, I think, under 300, or they're targeting under 300,000 RMB. So if those features are going to be part of Jidu's first vehicle, I mean, that's pretty significant, number one. And then number two, one thing that is a bit confusing for me, and again, this is me following mostly on the English side, is the sub brands, right? Because there was Apollo Go for the app and please correct me if I'm wrong, Lei, but are they replacing the Apollo Go app branding with Luobo Kuaipao? And
That
there's
is
Apollo Moon.
my understanding.
Yes.
That
Okay.
it'll be integrated into this one global Kuaibao branding.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
And that's going to be the common strategy, or that is the common strategy, to get people funneled into the ecosystem using one single point of entry. And so that single point of entry allows you to utilize a vast number of services, or, in anticipation of future services being launched, right? And so you can expect that, generally speaking, from almost every OEM that has multiple brands, a mobility division, or anything that's trying to build on the service revenue. So the battle of platforms, the battle of ecosystems, that's what we're starting to see with Baidu entering, utilizing the Luobo Kuaipao, right? So
yeah, that would be a good take. So,
but it would be good for them to simplify further some of these other mini services or features, because I saw in your tweet, in Chinese, you'd written all these different acronyms or sayings for, advanced driving assist, autonomous driving. So it's getting really confusing for people, right?
This is our next topic, which we can.
Yeah. So that's a good segue. Why don't we move on to that?
Yeah. So I mean, the reason we put NIO and Tesla up, it's more so on NIO more than Tesla. But the reason being that Tesla launched this, NHTSA launched this investigation into Tesla's Autopilot, incidents
on Monday.
With its vehicles specifically hitting police or ambulance flashing vehicles that are stopped. And this is exactly the scenario that the NIO ES8 accident was in, which the vehicle was under its NOP, Navigate on Pilot, and hitting a stopped sort of the highway, what do you call it, the expressway working vehicle.
Yeah.
That usually, if you've driven in China, they pop up on the leftmost lane of the expressway, without shoulders. Usually, a lot of the Chinese expressways don't have left side shoulders. Okay, so they will put the cones ahead of them. So this is the same problem that the NIO and ESA and Tesla is facing. So I thought that was very coincidental that they will happen at the same time. But referring back to my WeChat post of all these terminologies in Chinese, the way this whole
let me interrupt you really quickly, because it should be noted that this is on the heels of an EC6 also getting into an accident. So there's actually been 2 accidents in the last couple of weeks involving NIO vehicles, and there are 2 fatalities. So to your point about this is more about NIO, and it's pretty serious. And so it's not just one-off accident, but it's 2 consecutive accidents in a couple of weeks, in the span of a couple of weeks. So, there's been some controversy on social media with regards to nothing's really been addressed yet, right? And so go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that people understood that it's not just this one incident.
The strange part of the ESA accident was the way it surfaced. It surfaced from a statement put out by one of the companies that was founded by the owner who was killed. This company called Meiyihao, right? So they put out a statement, and there was a clear line of wording that said that NOP autonomous driving was on. I'm translating the Chinese, 自动驾驶, which is autonomous driving, and that was that opened a can of worms. Okay, I don't know if I got the expression right.
So just so people know and are clear, NOP stands for Navigation on Pilot, which is NIO's, for lack of specificity, NIO's version of full self-driving, right?
Well, to be exact, here's the NIO has its own NIO Pilot, right? So NIO
Yes.
Pilot has these, ACC, lane keeping, whatever these functions. But NOP is kind of like you have to pay for it.
Yes.
If you remember in the Q2 earnings, William Lee said the take rate was 80% for the NOP. And there's two different packages. There's the simpler package and there's the whole package. So the whole package, I think, which you have to pay like 39,000 RMB, gives you the ability to a lot of the expressways and city elevated highways. By using NOP, you can merge into traffic and exit out of traffic, and the vehicle will automatically select the most optimal lane to operate in. And this is in conjunction with high definition mapping. So it's basically a hands-on, eyes-on level 2 driving, but it's a bit below Super Cruise, GM Super Cruise, which is a hands-off but eyes-on assisted driving, which means you can take your hands off for a bit, but you have to keep your eyes, on the roads, and there will be a DMS system. So NOP is
DMS means driver monitoring system.
So I guess the closest, NOP is also similar to the NGP by Xpeng. They did a stunt right earlier this year.
Yes.
Similar capabilities. It's just a level higher than your normal, lane keeping, distance keeping. And for the Super Cruise is you have to touch the signal stall to engage a automatic lane change. I think on a NOP you can do this by itself.
So just a bit more background here. So the NOP, I believe, was released in October of 2020. So it actually hasn't been in the market for super long.
Right.
And when NIO announced it, it said, to your point earlier, it combines navigation, HD maps, and NIO Pilot, which, I equate NIO Pilot to Tesla's Autopilot and then NOP to Tesla's FSD. So, and a take rate of 80% is pretty high. They did also, during that announcement, they warned people that, there's a lot of situations where, you shouldn't be using it, right? So they were very clear on that stuff too. And in this case, for the 31-year-old entrepreneur who was killed, he had been using NOP 50% of the time he's in the car. So he had grown to trust this system like wholeheartedly, right? So
yeah, what I was getting to at the beginning was when this statement put out by Mei Yihao came out with that line of wording, that to me was putting the blame on NIO, okay? That was, basically that. And
yes.
But, so far this accident, it's interesting, we've seen 4 statements so far, okay? So the statement put out by Mei Yihao, and then a statement put out by NIO saying that one of their employees went to the car and kind of cut off, and there was rumors that the data was taken or something.
Yeah.
And they put out a statement saying that wasn't the case. A third statement was put out by the local highway traffic police. That statement didn't have anything except to say what happened, the accident. But
right.
Who's at fault? Nothing. There's no conclusion. We haven't heard yet. And then here's the interesting turn. A fourth statement put out by like 500 NIO owners, unofficial statement, not by NIO, saying that, we know what NOP is. We know what NIO Pilot is. We know what it does. We support it. And, we hope the media don't report it as something bad.
Right.
And then
something faulty, something wrong,
and then
something.
This came out, the rest of the owners started objecting this statement, So we have a kind of a civil war going on among NIO owners. And this is where things stand. But, I don't think this is about, not so much about NOP, as so much about the Chinese terminology being used. That's where the debate is, whether you put 自动, autonomous, into this assisted driving, which that Meihao statement was clearly doing, said this was autonomous driving. Yep. But everybody knows NOP is not autonomous driving. It's just a higher level of driver assistance.
Assisted driving.
Right? So, and now you've seen media starting to report, some media came out with a huge list of all the brands that have launched, L2 or similar features, and they ran a table and see whether there was exaggeration involved, and quite a few of them actually did.
Yes.
The most infamous one is WM Motors W6, which was marketed as China's first driverless or self-driving production car. And if you read the fine print, it's only under the automated valet parking mode that it does that. But when you market it out as China's first self-driving production car, then that's not right.
Yeah. And, the other thing that I will point out is we see kind of a common thread with the EV startups. Let's lump Tesla into this group because they seem to be more aggressive with their marketing and allowing their drivers or their users or their customers to use these services a bit more liberally than a GM or a Ford, right? Who has the team of lawyers that GM and Ford have are probably in the hundreds, right? So where an OEM, when GM launches Super Cruise on the Lyric, it's going to be only certain scenarios. It's going to be very clear, and they won't let you use it because it's going to be geofenced, I believe, unless GM has deemed that the area that you're using it in is approved and safe. Whereas some of these EV startups are saying, okay, we don't recommend you use it here in these scenarios, but either the driver monitoring system or the system itself still allows you to override or use the system regardless of whether it's recommended or not. And so I think this is part of that mindset where I think traditional car companies are much more conservative when it comes to new technological features than an EV startup. But I digress a little bit. That's a little bit off topic, but I think it's worth noting that, and this is where the regulation needs to come in, right? And hence the NHTSA investigation into Tesla Autopilot. Now, part of that has to do with the Biden administration. I think the Trump administration had a bit more of a laissez-faire regulatory or investigative policy towards transportation and traffic. There hasn't been a NHTSA head for 3 years or something, 3 or 4 years. And so I believe the Biden administration is going to appoint someone, but I also believe the Biden administration is going to be much more aggressive on investigations. So I don't think they're actually calling out Tesla. I just think this is going to be a trend moving forward. So yeah, just wanted to kind of take a detour a bit for a second and make those comments.
Yeah, so debate is most centered on, different terminologies, and there are a lot of them in Chinese, by the way. And also the use of, the SAEs level 1, 2, 3, 4,
level
5.
2, yes.
These are being abused somewhat by the industry and in China as well.
Mm-hmm.
Using things like L2.99999. What the heck is that? L2 plus, L2 2.5. I think inherently we might understand it, but the way SAE classification is set up, it's often being debated in the industry anyways.
Well even the car makers are very specifically leaning on the L2 versus L3, right? Because L2, from a legal standpoint, it's still clearly on the user or the driver, right, to monitor, right? L3 is when, and I believe still only in Japan, as Honda offered L3, but L3 is when the liability switches onto the automaker or the product manufacturer. So
L3, they're supposedly, so Honda Legend does that in Japan. If we forget about Audi AA for a while, so Honda Legend being maybe the first one, but there's another one, the Mercedes S-Class, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and probably the EQS as well. Also plans to have this feature, and they already said it's L3, but it can be only used on divided highways at under a certain speed where you can look away, do other stuff. So basically eyes off.
Yeah.
But you have to get back within how many seconds, right? That's the definition of L3. Within a certain amount of time, you have to retain control.
And to your point, the Honda Legend, the L3 system can only be used during traffic jams. So if it goes above a certain speed limit, then it disengages and you need to take full control back.
Right. I think probably it's close to a similar case for the S-Class as well. So still, you don't have like a L3 anywhere L3, right? These are still under specific circumstances. But most of what's out there, even let's say FSD, right? Because you have your driver, you have to constantly monitor whatever the car is doing.
Well, and let me go off on a tangent for 30 seconds because the driver monitoring systems on these vehicles, generally speaking, I won't call anyone out in particular, are either useless, non-existent, or need to be fortified so that they can't be gamed, okay? Because this is also allowing the customer to use these vehicles in scenarios where they're not recommended to be used, right? And so I could see driver monitoring systems becoming much more substantial in vehicles, whether there's a camera looking at you, whether it's focusing on your eyes to where they're looking, or whether or not you're using your phone, looking at your phone. I think, and these are actually fairly simple things because most smart EVs now have internal cameras and motion sensors that will easily identify whether or not a driver is paying attention. So I could see, because NHTSA is actually not a regulatory body. It would need to be the NTSB to issue new regulations. The NHTSA is actually just the investigative body, and they can make recommendations. So I see that across the pond happening, and I see that in China happening, where the driver monitoring systems really need to be much more proactive.
Yeah, and I thought the last paragraph of the NHTSA statement, I think, is very much relevant to what's going on for both Tesla and NIO, the specific NIO ESA accident. This is what it says. The investigation will assess technologies and methods used to monitor, assist, and enforce the driver's engagement with the dynamic driving task during autopilot operations. I think that's very important. It will also include examination of the contributing circumstances for the confirmed crashes. There were 11 of them.
Yeah, 11. One fatality too. So it's not like these were fender benders, right?
That's why recently MIIT came out with that entry administration for intelligent connected vehicles. And one part of that opinion piece was to do something about hands off. When is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? When you can do it safely? There was specific, requirements that whether it's technologically done or something else, is to address this monitor, assist, and enforce the driver's engagement, right? With the driving task. So,
well, the bottom line is, and I see the Chinese government less so than the U.S. government, but the Biden administration has already kind of shown that they're going to take a more active approach towards it. But, rather than the allowing the tech companies to say, trust us, or the car companies to say, trust us, we know what we're doing, in the United States, at least, there's still a non-significant volume of smart EVs on the road. So they can still get in front of this. There's going to be a bit of controversy if they try to be too heavy-handed. But I think the Chinese government, with Tesla selling a couple 100,000 cars last year, doubling that this year, and the China market getting to 3 million units, they're trying to get in front of it right now. And and I know that, with Tesla, with NIO, these systems are probably pretty robust, right? There's a ton of use cases where they're not going to work very well. But my concern is some of these smaller companies that are trying to bring out these ADAS. I won't even call them autonomous anymore. Let's just call them assisted driving systems, right? Because they're not truly autonomous. These lesser regional automakers who have partnerships with lesser known autonomous vehicle or mobility or AI companies that are going to be more prevalent in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. I mean, that could turn into a huge mess, right? And so, and really dangerous. And, once we get into the millions of sales every year, for sure, right?
Yeah, and I see the immediate consequence of this NIO ESA accident. And this is already happening. You will see, especially these Chinese smart EV startups, tweak their marketing. And this, I've already seen this from Li Auto. They changed their...
That's because of that video.
Yeah, 自动辅助驾驶, they changed it to AD 辅助驾驶. It's basically the same thing. But we all understood what 自动辅助驾驶 means. It's ADAS. But because of that 美一号 statement putting out 自动驾驶, it got blown up, I think. And Xpeng changed on one of these P5 marketing pages to 智能辅助驾驶, which is what? Intelligent assisted driving. So it's like the debate is, let's get rid of 自动, the autonomous characters, if it means assisted driving only. And you're going to see, I think, these companies pay more attention for their salespeople, how they address and when they talk to potential customers, to not exaggerate what these functions can do. So, yeah.
And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but, the driver of the ESA, the 31-year-old, I forget his name.
Lin, Mr. Lin.
Yeah, entrepreneur, he was lulled into a false sense of security because he was using it over 50% of the time, right? And it's not about the 99 times that it works. It's about the one time it doesn't, right? And we know that one time could have serious consequences because they have. And regarding the Li Auto comment that I just made, we've seen short videos on Insta and Twitter of people driving their Teslas in full self-driving in numerous scenarios. There was one video, I'm sure there's more, but there was one video in particular with a driver in a Li 1 who had effectively pulled away from the seat and was driving, and it was allowing the car to drive autonomously. And within 24 hours, I think Li Auto made a statement saying that they don't encourage any of that. And I think that also alludes to the fact that of them changing some of the language on their system. So, I don't think the Chinese government would let dozens of these types of videos out on the internet. And so,
yeah. So to me, this NIO case, if this Mr. Lin was in fact abusing the NOP system, then he is the one responsible. But NIO at the same time also holds partial responsibility, as many other competitors in how maybe they're not doing it knowingly or on purpose, but
I think you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. I think there's a handful of them that are glamorizing it, right?
But in China, anytime you hit something from behind, let's say I'm the guy in the ESA, I hit something in front of me, I will be responsible.
Yeah, it's my fault.
It's my fault. I mean, I've been in that accidents before. I know. Probably they're gonna, the police is gonna have that verdict as well, but. Trusting something is totally different than abusing something.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we don't know exactly what happened. That's the thing. We know NLP was in use, but what if he fell asleep or there's some kind of sickness or we don't know.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's important to understand the context, right? Right now, we just understand what happened. We don't know what the data shows us or what the data points to because he had to have been going really fast, number one, right? And then number two, was he even paying attention? And again, I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but it would be good because at a take rate of 80%, if there's not a clear explanation, right, outside of pointing to the fine print disclaimer that says don't use it, unless there's a clear explanation as to why this accident occurred, you could lose a lot of trust in that system, right? And then that take rate could turn into a 20, 30, 40% issue or could be reduced to 20, 30, 40%. And so I think it's important for NIO to get out in front of it. And we had talked about this earlier this week when they recalled those 5,000 batteries a year and a half ago. They were very quick about making a statement, about being very, very aggressive on the remedy. And it would be good for them to do that now as well. Not only because of this one accident, because people are lumping these two pretty much non-related accidents together, right? Because two people died. And so I know they're trying to be careful, and I'm sure they're talking to their lawyers, but man.
Maybe, when they announced the July numbers, it was flat. That was like a bad omen, right?
Yeah.
And now with these two accidents, and now their owners, this huge rift among the owners, that is a bit surprising to me, because they used to be a very knit group. And
yeah, I'd written this down too. Had you seen, up until recently, any crack or any like splinter group that said NIO cars suck or like unsatisfied customers? Because I haven't heard about any. I've spoken to lots of people, but up until these recent accidents, had you heard about any unsatisfied NIO customers? Because I don't think there.
Recently there's been some complaints about seats for NIO, but that's been overshadowed obviously by these accidents.
Okay.
But yeah, I think just NIO is just going through a rough patch. And I was saying that. It's nothing compared to what Tesla is going through, even if they're already an 18-year-old company. NIO is a 7-year-old company, right? Tesla is about to sell 1 million vehicles a year, and they're still going through so much scrutiny. And this is nothing for NIO. So it's at a time where they're ramping up their new products,
and trying to establish foundations in foreign markets, right? And this will be highlighted in Norway, I'm certain. With Tesla, at least, they just have had their foot on the gas for the last 24 or 30 months. Shanghai Giga, Berlin Giga, Austin Giga. And it's nonstop. And unfortunately, that's kind of the nature of the business now. It's every month or every 3 weeks or every 6 weeks, there's some major announcement, or there's, from automaker X or automaker Y. And that's only going to increase significantly as more and more smart EVs enter the market, because again, we don't need an engineering change that takes a year to get into the new model year. We can flash the software, and now guess what? You have version 7.0 of FSD that allows you to do X, Y, and Z. And so this is where these automakers get caught up, or these EV makers get a little bit caught up, because they're also trying to stay in the news for the good reasons, not for these controversies. So I don't see that, at least these rapid fire announcements from different automakers, I don't see that slowing down anytime soon. And with the United States hopefully going to finally approve the infrastructure bill, it could create another boost to many of the foreign automakers, right? Because I saw this tweet earlier that Volkswagen is already building prototypes of the ID series in Chattanooga. So they're ready. They're priming the pump right now to take advantage of the United States pivot towards EVs.
And for NIO, when you have these user groups, owner groups that are so vocal, that are so want to be, every one of them is a brand ambassador. And sometimes when this lawyer owner, right, who issued that kind of joint statement, it was like a signed document on one of the applications.
Right.
He kind of took this thing by himself, acted, kind of prematurely, I think. So when you have that happen, it's like double-edged sword, right? your user group are your brand ambassadors. But sometimes if they do things,
they can hold you hostage. They can hold you hostage for
that's,
sure.
I think this was a classic example when sometimes if you do a bit too far or too much, you thought I did something good for the brand, but it turned out a different way. This is what the NIO ecosystem, their user ecosystem, could backfire.
And one thing we should also note and remember and recall back is that up until the end of 2020, NIO had only sold, since establishing themselves in 2016, I think, they had only sold 49,000 cars, right? So it's not like there's a NIO on every corner, right? So if they're getting this type of controversy, and they've sold, I think, 40,000 cars or 35,000 cars this year so far. So they're still, less than since inception.
They have about 120,000 owners now.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it is crazy how again, the engineering teams need to look and do their investigation to see if there's a design flaw and then fix it very quickly. Unless it's the driver that's abusing the feature. But even then, there needs to be a careful marketing communications type of strategy blaming the driver. I'm not laughing, but they still need to be very careful about that.
NIO's position is they will not issue another statement until the verdict of the police investigation concludes, I guess, for both accidents, because we still haven't heard anything on the EC6.
Yeah, I know less about the EC6 accident than I do about the ES8 accident. So we are at 8:26, and I know that the AI Day for Tesla is going on simultaneously. So we will open it up for questions, Lei, unless you have anything further.
No.
But let me ask you this: for the Baidu AI World Conference, had you been to any or viewed any in the past? And
yeah,
did you think that CCTV thing was strange?
No, it wasn't strange. I mean, considering the outbreak going on, what's going on with the outbreak, right? Probably you can't have many people attending an event. That's one. And
no, I'm saying the CCTV co-hosting, because I don't remember Baidu World Conference ever being co-hosted.
Yeah, I think this was his first time, and I thought the Sabeining, I thought he's very popular. I thought he was good.
Well, there was that one moment where one of the vice presidents had talked about the liver function, and the host kind of like ripped the Baidu VP, and he just kept on going at it. So I thought that was a bit awkward. Remember that moment? So
yeah, it was just a co-branding collaboration, I guess.
And of course, right when they launched that 86-inch TV, I'd get on the Xiaomi app and look to see, their Xiaomi's 86-inch TV, how much that cost, what the features are, to see if it feels pretty competitive. And it was an event, a conference / infomercial, because they were like, oh yeah, right now you can buy it for $5. So please, so that was a bit strange.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of Baidu Create. It's similar, right? It's held in the summer. I've been to a few of those. Yeah.
So we will be talking about the Chengdu Motor Show very soon, in a few weeks, right? And so
next week we'll probably talk about XPeng earnings. It's right on Thursday. It's next Thursday, and then following end of the month is the 29th is the Chengdu Motor Show.
Right, and I also have to say that on Twitter, what was going on with NIO and Tesla with NHTSA with the NHTSA investigation, I did see a few XPeng sponsored tweets that leaned into their safety record, or their awards for safety. So they took full advantage of that. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at Leixing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.